In the time remaining, I want to briefly talk about Israel because it's part of this bill as well. You know, it's interesting the last couple of days, this freak out over something that Trump said about NATO. Everybody's running around freaking out, oh my God, he's going to get us out of NATO. They forget Trump was already president once, and he didn't pull us out. And in fact, he deployed extra troops to Poland. We increased our troop presence in Poland because Poland was contributing towards NATO. But put that aside for a moment. Because this whole notion of this theoretical Russia is going to invade countries because Trump is going to encourage them, all these people on television with all this silliness. Well, Israel's in a war right now. Israel's in a war right now, an existential war. Israel's enemies right now want to destroy Israel. They don't want to harm Israel. They don't want to defeat Israel military. They want to destroy Israel. They are in a war right now. And we have a president that's undermining Israel. Undermining. You say no. Okay. Here's the stuff we're now reading. I just want to go off this article from NBC, which is as you know, NBC, one of the most well-known conservative outlets in America, right? This is from them. President Joe Biden has been venting his frustration in private conversations with campaign donors over his inability to persuade Israel to change its military tactics in Gaza. He's been trying to get Israel to agree to a ceasefire, but Netanyahu is, quote, giving him hell. Netanyahu, quote, is impossible to deal with. He feels like this is enough, one of the people said of his views expressed by Biden. It has to stop. In some of his private conversations, his descriptions of dealing with Netanyahu are peppered with contemptuous references to Netanyahu as this guy. And at least 3 recent instances, Biden called Netanyahu an A something. I can't say it on the Senate floor, according to 3 people directly familiar with his comments. It goes on. He's grown steadily more frustrated with the rising Palestinian civilian death toll in Gaza. He took a sharper tone on Thursday, described Israel's military assault in Gaza as over the top. So I guess this bill is funding Israel's over-the-top effort to defeat a terrorist group that didn't just massacre over 1,000 Israelis, but is organizing principles the destruction of the Jewish state. Frustrations with Netanyahu have also not led to major policy shift, but his administration has begun to consider such options. 2 weeks ago, officials told NBC News that the administration was discussing delaying or slowing U.S. weapon sales to Israel as leverage to get Netanyahu to dial down Israeli military operations in Gaza. As leverage. So you're going to vote for a bill to give money to Israel so Biden can use it as leverage against our ally, Israel. This is an ally involved in a war right now. Not theoretical, not a campaign speech, right now. You're worried about undermining NATO, worry about undermining our ally, Israel, in a war right now, a real war. And it goes on. I mean, I could go on forever. They're drafting options for formally recognizing an independent Palestinian state, the so-called 2-state solution. How are you going to reach, that's the ideal outcome in a perfect world. In the real world, how are you going to have a 2-state solution with a groups whose goal is a 1-state solution? The Palestinian organizations, the PLO and Authority in the West Bank and Hamas and Gaza, they don't have a 2-state solution. They want a 1-state solution. Their 1-state solution is that from the river to the sea, there not be a single Jew. That's their solution. And you want to give them their own territory where they can launch more attacks to achieve this goal. I could go on, but all of this, how does this wind up in the press? This is a strategic leak. They put this out there to message their activist base, because there is an activist base within the Democratic coalition that is threatening to vote against Biden. We've seen these reports. That's why he sent the White House aides to go meet with anti-Semites, pro-Hamas, pro-Hezbollah activists in Michigan last week, people that claim that our government is controlled by Jewish money. That's who they met with. These are the people that are disrupting his speeches, calling him Genocide Joe. That's who he met with. And this is designed to try to appease them because they're threatening to vote against him. That's undermining an ally. That's happening real time right now. And all this talk about ceasefire. We can't have a ceasefire. Let me tell you how we can have a ceasefire. Hamas can surrender its weapons and it can release its hostages. But they won't. Hamas doesn't care how many Palestinian civilians die. In fact, they deliberately position military targets next to civilians so that civilians get killed. They want civilians to be killed. They steal the aid money. Has anyone wondered how much does it cost to build the tunnels that they have built under the ground in Gaza? Millions of dollars spent building tunnels, not building hospitals, not building schools, not building industries, not creating jobs for the people of Gaza, tunnels for their terrorists so they could hide hostages, so they could hide weapons, so they can infiltrate and kill Jews in Israel. That's what they spend their money on. We're going to send them more of that money when this bill passes. That's what you're voting for. It's in there. Look, this is part of a broader problem here. People have to be watching this and saying, these people are completely out of touch with our priorities. They've abandoned all common sense. The list of things that prove this are extraordinary. One of the things I see a lot in South Florida are people that have been in this country, that maybe came from Cuba 45 years ago. They've worked here their entire lives. They retire. They get $800, $900, $1,000 a month from Social Security. And then they run into somebody who just got here from Cuba 3 months ago, is 29 years old, doesn't work, and is given $1,500 a month in benefits by our government because they're refugees. That refugee, a year later, is traveling back to Cuba 15 times. So you're a refugee fleeing oppression from a place that you now go back and visit 15 times the following year. And in the meantime, we're giving you Medicaid, food stamps, health care for your children, cash payments from the refugee fund. So imagine if you've been working here for 40 years and your Social Security check is smaller than the benefits going to a 28-year-old able-bodied person who just got here. That's real. That happens. That's happening every day. That makes no sense. How about this one? Biden has issued a visa ban and sanctions against Israeli settlers. Where's the visa ban and sanctions on Hamas supporters who are here on student visas? We would never have given them the visa if they were Hamas supporters, but now that they're here, they can go up and down the street calling for intifada, saying anti-Semitic stuff, tearing down posters. We haven't taken away a single student visa or any other visitor visa. Go after the Israeli settlers, but not after the Hamas terrorists and Hamas terrorism supporters in our own country? That's happening. When the horrible events of January 6th happened, within hours, we had fences, the tallest fences you've ever seen, barbed wire, National Guard from multiple states. We had more National Guards people here than we had members of Congress, 5-1. Great people, sleeping in the kitchen, sleeping in the dining room. This place was protected. When a state decides we're going to build a fence and deploy the National Guard to protect our state and our sovereignty, let's go to the Supreme Court and force them to tear it down. So you'll build a fence and flood this place with National Guard to protect yourself in this capital, but you won't do it to protect our country. That makes no sense to people. That makes no sense. How about this? You know the leverage that Russia, you know why Russia, one of the reasons why they invaded Ukraine? Because they believed that Europe was so dependent on them for natural gas, they wouldn't do anything about it. And so Europe is doing something about it. And the U.S. says, and we will export our natural gas surpluses to you, so you don't have to depend on the Russians. And what does this administration do? They suspend LNG exports a couple weeks ago because a handful of TikTok influencers demanded it because of the climate. That makes no sense. But they did it. On issue after issue, we either have lost all common sense or we are consistently ignoring the needs of everyday hardworking Americans and putting something or someone above them over and over and over again. And that's why people lose faith in institutions. That's why they lose faith in leaders. That's why they lose faith in our process. That's what leads to populism. In the history of the world, you look at it over and over again. When people believe that their needs, their legitimate needs, are being ignored by the people who run the government, in the modern history, they have gone in one of two directions, and they are both toxic. One is socialism, the promise of the victim against the oppressor, and government's going to fix it all by controlling the economy and your lives. And the other direction they go is ethnic nationalism. The argument that all this is happening because somebody of another race, another color, another religion, they're to blame. One of your fellow countrymen are to blame. That's the danger in all of this. And that's why it's always so important that in a republic is capable of understanding and responding to the needs of people. And in our country, it's a people that for the better part of 25 or 30 years, we're told, it doesn't matter that we're going to send our factories and our jobs halfway around the world to another country. Don't worry, you're going to learn how to code. I mean, you're going to find a new job making a lot more money. Well, they never got to learn how to code, and they never found a better job, and they gutted our cities and communities and took them apart. They're tired of being put in second place, and it's happened too often, and it's happening here again now. And that's why I'm not going to support this bill, because it violates our most important responsibility, and that is to give voice to the people of this country and stop putting them in second place behind everything and everyone else. I yield the floor.